Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my wormery, and the two bins that you see out here on the bench, African Nightcrawler bin 1 and 2, ANC 1 and 2 over there. These systems were not really scheduled to get fed today. I juggled things around to move them to the front of the schedule for a pretty simple reason. They're now 100 days in service. Yay! Happy 100 days. And off here on the side you can see the little snack we put together for them. So if they were going to get fed on the original day that I had scheduled them for, because they were already penciled in to get fed maybe 4 days from now, I believe, after I guess maybe a 12-day interval between feedings, I noticed how today was becoming a milestone day for them. And sometimes I just like to juggle the schedule around semi-randomly like that, just to mix things up. Why not? Who knows? Coming back after only 8 days could result in us encountering a little worm party, still working down the last of what we fed them previously. We've been putting leaves out on the top surface as sort of a parting gift for them to have some material to play around in, but I think this stuff really starts to pay off and become very useful to the worms as once it gets blended in everywhere. And we'll always do that at the end, and then guess what? I've got my box of leaves. You might have noticed it earlier when we were panned out, seeing more of what's going on around the bench, and we'll give them even more. Just like we did last time. Last time, before we throw in their food, we dropped in some of my prepared bedding, of which I've got even more of today. We can just follow suit with what we did last time and deploy a similar assortment of bedding above and below the feeding they get. I definitely saw bits and pieces of the pepper that was thrown in here last time. It was just a whole pepper. I don't know, I saw some pieces of its skin and some of its seeds, I believe. It was somewhere around here. I excavated it a few seconds ago, and I was bumping into some sort of a larger object, leftover type something or another. Okay, here it is. Looks like it's just a fragment of the seed out of a mango. Very clean cut, so the other half of it, after being cut, has probably been placed into bin number 2. So I think we've created a nice enough gap here, and got another similar one. Another cut in half mango seed. We'll see what we find in bin number 2 after we excavate the feeding zone. As far as moisture goes, definitely a good bit of moisture in here. So times like this, I'm kind of glad that I'm coming in at the end with a dry material as my bedding, the dry leaves going out on the top surface. They're a great landing pad for all that moisture that's going to recirculate within the system anyway underneath the plastic. So here's another cut in half mango seed over here in bin number 2. Yep. And guess what? Not too surprising, another half of a mango seed. And almost identical conditions, I would say, here in bin number 2. And I believe we've almost created a large enough opening into which we could drop today's bonus feeding after only 8 days for a system that wasn't really deserving of being at the front of the line today, but you know what? I'm a goofball that way. I like doing funny things like this, just to intentionally disrupt the routine, just to lighten things up, throw in a little variety and not allow routine to take over too much. We're definitely being generous here with the bedding today, so perhaps we'll treat that right there. And even a generous bedding at the end too, which we'll add in after we've leveled things off and everything else, because why not? So a few pieces of melon already dropped in. Everything else is kind of frozen together in a chunk. Some of this I added at the end of the day yesterday. So there's a few chunks of vegetable matter that were used to create a broth, a soup, which I dropped in with some existing stuff that were already sitting in this assorted bag of veggies. And I'm finding that I am unable to dislodge stuff. I believe there's also some cabbage in here. That might be pepper. So let's get the implement out here that'll help us cut to the chase. I'll tell you, stuff is on here. So this is one fragment of that cooked vegetable came out of the broth. I know that this other piece of it sitting out here is also the same. I think there were 4 pieces, so the other 2 pieces are just going to be what's remaining in here. Here's a piece of something. It's not a large feeding. It was just sort of beginning to become the foundations of just an assorted bag of miscellaneous foods, which eventually develops into a large enough collection of stuff to be used for our routine feeding. But this not being a real routine feeding, it's just one that we're sneaking in here. Hey, why not? Why not just use this sort of small portion for them? And you know, I was reaching over for the prepared bedding, thinking we might throw some more in there, but I think that's a generous enough portion. Here's one of those mango seed husks. The other one must have been right near it. Might have already made its way back over into the feeding zone area. That's okay. It'll probably surface and be encountered later if it didn't. This is what I like right here, is when we take all that leafy matter that was resting out on the surface here and blend it together with the material in the system, which is coming along so nicely. For 100 days in service, I think even during the last check-in 8 days ago, we were commenting how nicely the system's progressing and how the castings were neatly piling up in here. There's always like a nice sized worm party there to welcome you. Good sized population, or seemingly a good sized population. Every visit with these systems seems like a fun one. Here too, mango seed husk, and blend in some leaves. Very nice. I wasn't sure what to make of the moisture situation, but I think we're in good shape, you know. I recognize the fact that some of the stuff that I'm adding today in the form of food brings with it moisture. And as I already mentioned earlier, I also recognize that some of the stuff I'm putting in as bedding, such as the dry leaves at the end, those are coming in without any, and they'll have a tendency to absorb moisture into themselves. But it never seems to do enough to really trigger any sort of a noticeable difference, so nothing to be worried about as far as I'm concerned. So bringing back the feeding zone indicators, because that was something I did not include in today's feeding. No coffee, just a bag of frozen veggies, which I kind of upgraded slightly by adding some watermelon. Those weren't part of the combo originally. I emptied the bag, didn't seem like much. It seemed like, you know what, let's treat them to a few pieces of watermelon. I'm sure they'll appreciate that as well. So on can come this bonus top coating of leaves, which is going to look so nice when we come back in here next time, all soaked from the recirculating moisture underneath the plastic. And just like the leaves we found when we arrived in here today, we'll get blended in and make the bedding even that much nicer. I'm sure the worms like it, or at least, I don't know. To say I'm sure, what can you be sure of these days? Not much, but it sure seems like the environment's something that the worms would probably appreciate. It's got nice moisture level, it's got nice bedding content, there's leftovers of foods from the last feeding, and now fresh foods coming in today. Even some stuff that was pre-cooked from a batch of soup, which hopefully they'll like. We'll see. All right, everyone, that's it for the check-in. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye now.